you are one of the stars that people do talk about in Creative Pro Wrestling. And that's kind of one of the definitive promotions in the New York area, if not the definitive promotion on Long Island. The company keeps growing, and a lot of stars have come out of it. How have you noticed it grow in recent years?
You could just watch TV now and see how it's grown. Guys like MJF and Chris Statlander are now primetime featured acts in their early 20s that just started training with the school literally within the past few years. And it's a culture there that really is something that it's going to be producing a lot of people worth checking out.
Right. And you mentioned that it can be seen on television in that sense, but it also can be watched as an internet-based promotion. Is it every episode is presented as a weekly show on there?
So there's two different ways you can watch it. On the High Spots Network, we put our bigger 3-hour events, 3+ maybe sometimes. Curt Hawkins is usually pretty strict on us not going over 3 hours. So, but our bigger 3-hour events are all up on High Spots TV. But there is a free component to stay up on a weekly basis, and that's on YouTube. And it's on the Creative Pro YouTube channel. It's called Cap TV, and it's right now. It's not a live experience for fans. A lot of that has to do with like New York promoting and licensing, and doctors have to be present.
Right.
Stuff that just would cost. It's not cost effective to do at the time, but it doesn't stop us from trying to figure out ways to give people more good content to check out.
And Creative Pro is very different in not only being co-owned and operated by WWE superstars active on the roster, but also being a school that's putting on a show. Are most of the people on the roster of the live shows people who are trained by Cap, or all of them?
Well, I can also correct you a little bit. Well, it's not correcting, add on top. It is co-owned and promoted by an active member of the WWE roster. The other owner is an active producer on the WWE main roster for Raw.
Right.
He's the well-dressed Pat Buck. He's the well-dressed young producer you often see. Probably his most famous appearance was when he got mauled, absolutely annihilated by Brock Lesnar back, I think, in November. But yeah, it's a unique experience there to have two guys who are so well plugged in, for sure. As far as the show goes, it's a real big mix. So I've been going at it now for over a decade. I met Curt Hawkins years ago at his original school, the NYWC on Long Island, where I started. And there's a handful of us that also started at NYWC, and then there's other local promotions around here too that they just met Brian along the way and Pat along the way, and it's kind of this brilliant amalgamation of these brilliant young students that they have trained from scratch, and these handful of people that they've kind of scooped up along the way to make up what I think is a really, really talented and unbelievable roster, and even the graduate from the school. You only know 2 right now, but that's because the school's only been in existence for like 5 years.
Sure. When people talk about wrestling scenes, in the 80s, they always talked about the Minnesota people, Rick Rude and all that. In terms of Long Island, I believe Curt Hawkins is a Long Island guy, or at least associated with Long Island. Zack Ryder is there. I think Perry Saturn had ties here, Taz, etc. Is Long Island a key part of being a great wrestler, or is it just so happening that all these people are growing up 20 miles outside of Manhattan?
I think it has a lot to do with this area being so high condensed with shows. Mm-hmm. I mean, you live here, I live here, I grew up here. I think on a given weekend, in a 2-hour radius, 3-hour radius, there's probably like 10, 15 shows you or I could attend, varying in size and varying in, ability of people on the show.
Right.
And I think what it is that generally speaking, the most successful of the bunch tends to be the ones that consistently find work. Mm-hmm. And with it all being so locally and at your fingertips, it's just, it's rinse and repeat, man. It's reps, it's picking up the weight, putting it down. You only get better by doing it more. And that's what I think a lot of these guys get the huge benefit of.
Now, you yourself are 10 years or so into the business. Is there a career accomplishment that you're most proud of?
It's funny because for me, wrestling was always kind of like the add-on to my life because I'm successful in television and broadcasting for all different means, not just wrestling. You know, I think I always kind of started my goals off very small. I got into wrestling, as you said, over a decade ago. And the first thing was just to get in a ring. That was like the ultimate, because the first time I got to a school, it was, you don't get in that ring until you deserve it. And it was 2.5 months before, you know, I quote, deserved it.
Right. And
I deserved it because I worked my ass off, but my reward was basically a chop class, which is where I just got lit up. And then it just always evolved. Okay, I want a match. Okay, it was a battle royal. Okay, I want at least a tag match. It was a tag match. Okay, I want a singles match. Okay, it was a singles match. I want to win a title. Then it became, I wanted to wrestle for a promotion that wasn't my at-home school promotion. Then it was, I want to wrestle out of state. And then, you know, I've never really reached for the stars, but I always kind of incrementally just kept doing it. And then I left New York for a while, and then I started producing for a while out at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Mm-hmm. I actually did wrestle on television for them under a mask whenever they just didn't have somebody. They're like, oh, Pat can do it. And I was like, sure. So that was really cool. And then ultimately, I guess the most proudest accomplishment, I'm just throwing so much long-winded answer.
But great answer, I must add, because we're getting somewhere with this.
The biggest accomplishment of my life was at my peak weight, I weighed 490. I played college football. I wrestled with it. And then really when I moved away to LA, I started losing the weight. And then I came back, and now I weigh about anywhere between 195 and 215 is where I'm at usually. And losing the weight, the big goal was just to get back in the ring. And I kept delaying it. And then Curt Hawkins was like, now you're on the next show. And I'm like, well, I don't have gear, man. And he's like, well, you got 6 weeks, figure it out. Because my old gear obviously didn't fit.
Right.
You know, unless I wanted to put like my tag team partner in the singlet with me. But like, so he kind of forced my hand, which was great, because now I've had, in the past 8 months now, I've had about 9 matches. You know, I got to balance it with my responsibilities of life, and, you know, also deal with injuries that I've had along the way. I'm a little older. My body was a little bit more worn and torn. But like, probably the biggest accomplishment at this point is absolutely just being able to get back in the ring and being a normal wrestler, you know. You know, people made fun of me when I got back in the ring for the first time a year ago for training, is that I wrestled like I was a big man. Because obviously, you know, like I'm doing squishers in the corners. I'm wanting to do like big like sitting moves. You know, I'm thinking that like no matter how big the guy is, the person I run into should fall over. So it was a lot to get used to. But I think now I'm getting my feet back underneath me, and I think the next couple of years, I think I have a chance to make something interesting happen, and I hope it does at least.
So going back to what you said about how your wrestling goals were growing and goal-oriented in general, that you were progressing, at the same time you're somebody who lost the weight and kept the weight off. Is everything that you do professionally very goal-oriented rather than naturally just meeting somebody in a bar and taking it from there?
I have 2 very big theories about things. I'm not short-term goal-oriented anymore. I used to be as a kid, as I went through all that. I'm very long-term goal-oriented and very in the moment. So I think a lot of people get bogged down with, like, if I don't get a WWE tryout in a year, I'm done. And it's like, well, that's not really how that stuff's done.
Right.
Or if I don't get that promotion at work in the next 6 months, I'm quitting. The fact is that I think more like in terms of 5 and 10 years now as an adult, and then also whatever I'm doing in the moment, just do it the best I can possibly do it. And I think my long-term goal now is, and it's gonna happen, I know it is, it's just I would love to I've never done extra work at WWE. I would love to just go and do extra work. That's a long-term goal. I used to wrestle, my biggest match was in front of 1,200 people. I'd like to have another building with at least a 4-figure crowd in it again. So that's another big goal. Mm-hmm. And that's not an easy one to accomplish by any means anymore. Those are goals that, like, before I'm done, whether I'm done at 40 or done at 35, like, those are the goals that in wrestling that I'm trying to figure out now. But that being said, you know, we got a Creative Pro show coming up that's local here in Long Island in Hicksville, And the building we're in can probably only hold 100 or so. But that's not going to stop me from, at that moment, putting on the best performance I possibly can. So I try to stay long-term oriented and focus on what I'm doing today.
Is there a lot of overlap or even any overlap between your film and television production-oriented careers and wrestling?
100%. I started producing Championship Wrestling from Hollywood because of my background. I met Dave Marquez through a friend, and even when I moved out there, a lot of my mutual friends, guys like Kevin Steen, Joey Ryan, Tony Nese was big out there at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they all were suggesting me to people out there for just to work as a wrestler, and I just wasn't really. I didn't have the time at the time to commit to it.
Mm-hmm.
So becoming a producer at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood was 100% because of my background.
Mm-hmm.
And then about, I guess it was 14 months ago, the well-dressed producer we spoke of, Pat Buck,
Right.
He ended up getting a lot of buzz, per se. And it was a project that himself, myself, and actually MJF, his student, we were coming up with a character and some different concepts for him because he wanted to get himself back out there. Because he even allowed himself to get a little distracted and was doing acting jobs and things like that. Even though he's a wonderful coach, a wonderful mind, he got even a little distracted. And
Sure.
he just decided, it was about a year and a half ago, he decided he wanted to do this. So we came up with some concepts for him. We came up with the Buzz Killer gimmick, which was like he was going to basically take out anybody with any, indie buzz. And, part of it was that he was just this guy who did no flips or anything like that. He was just going to kick your ass. And we shot the first promo, which was this compiled promo that's shot where he's almost at like a therapy group.
Right.
And that promo just blew up. And it was like, it was crazy how fast that promo blew up. I think within the first 24 hours on like Twitter, it got like 200,000 views. It was something ridiculous where it was like, holy crap. And then like his life changed because of that one thing.
Right.
100%. And we shot 6 other ones. Only 2 actually made air because just suddenly the discussions with the WWE started happening. And it was funny because one that didn't make air was him in the middle of a class being disrespected by a student, and then he snaps and beats up the student. And at the time, he was being invited down to come down to guest train at NXT.
Yeah.
So he was like, yeah, I don't think it's the best look maybe for me to put out the promo where I'm kicking the shit out of a student and such. But yeah, I mean, so that's probably the biggest overlap I've ever had in wrestling, and that was monster successful for Pat, which I couldn't be happier for him.
And a couple of the names you said, Kevin Steen, people who are big fans of wrestling know that that's Kevin Owens. Tony Nese, we're seeing him a lot on WWE programming. And it seems like in the last 10 or so years that you've been in wrestling, we've seen that point of independent wrestling becoming the mainstream, kind of like how the indie emo and punk bands from Long Island, like Taking Back Sunday and Brand New, became MTV bands that you heard on the radio. Do you see that kind of connection between music and wrestling, where the DIY ethic of making your own merch and basement shows eventually leads to arenas?
Yeah, I mean, it 100% does. I mean, I think that proof has been in the pudding with all sorts of entertainment for years and years and years and years. You bring up Taking Back Sunday and Brand New and all them. I mean, I can even take you to someone like Childish Gambino.
Sure.
Who was just making music on his own and then was making YouTube comedy videos for Derek Comedy. And then suddenly, next thing you know, he has a hit record. And then suddenly, next thing you know, he's on a hit show. And then suddenly, next thing you know, he's doing all these small bit parts. And now he's probably, I think someone referred to him. He didn't refer to himself, thank God, as this, but like the entertainment Jesus. Like he's the most likely to EGOT next,
EGOT, there's a good 30 Rock reference.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
And 100%, a groundswell starts with hustle and putting stuff out there now, whether it's making t-shirts, whether it's putting out YouTube content, TikTok, whatever, man. Just, I think 100% there's an ownership that people take when they watch a guy like MJF, wrestle at Hicksville in a garage with 100 people, and they're a hot crowd but they saw him wrestle 4 years ago when he was just wearing black trunks and had a polo popped up shirt and was a kid who was, clearly not polished but knew what was going on. And then for those 4 years they watch him suddenly progress and progress and progress and progress, and then suddenly becoming this standout pro wrestler who now is, he's in the ring going promo for promo with Arn Anderson, DDP, with Cody Rhodes, so it's crazy. But I think there 100% is an ownership and a swell that wrestlers have certainly done a really great job. Wrestlers, musicians, performers have all done a good job of being able to turn that into, fruit.
Yeah, and bringing it back to you, as somebody who was over 400 pounds, how did you lose that weight and keep it off? Because a lot of people just reading on the internet are always going to be looking to make changes that are permanent along those lines, and it's not always clear how to get them besides eat less, exercise more.
So eat less, exercise more is the answer. But again, staying with what I was saying before about trying to be long-term goal-oriented but being focused on what you're doing now, there's a way to do these things the right way, which some people just, it blows their mind. But like, starving yourself isn't always the answer. Mm-hmm. Fad diets aren't the answer. So that's like the first thing I could say right away, is that being in the moment means actually doing your research and figuring out what works and what doesn't. Because if you ever hang out with, I think the most, bringing it into wrestling, the most aesthetically pleasing person I've ever known in my life personally is Tony Nese. That dude is ripped everywhere. And I've seen his diet. His diet is not particularly super clean. It's not bad, but it's not super clean. Mm-hmm. And yes, it has something to do with his genes. Yes, he puts in all that extra work at the gym, but he also understands what his body needs. And so that's the first thing, is understanding what your body needs. But also understanding that, like, hey, if you're just going to have 3 courses of salad a day, like, you're definitely depriving your body, and you're never going to lose your weight and grow that way.
Sure.
So the biggest thing I can say is figuring out a diet that works for you. Because I've seen it happen a ton of times. It still happens to me from time to time, that if you're on a strict diet and you're like, yep, I'm making a change, and then suddenly it's like, oh, I'm so hungry. And then you blow it out going to McDonald's, Taco Bell, whatever, whatever your poison is, really, in that case. The biggest thing is just finding, not using the word diet to describe your eating habits now, and finding what works. That's the biggest thing, 100%. Whether you work out, whether you don't, that can put the cherry on top to get you to true goals. But figuring out a diet that you can stick with long term, that you can take out to the world most of the time. Because, I think you and me were just talking about, do you like going on cruises? Guess what? When I'm on a cruise, I'm not always on my diet.
Yeah.
Like, I was just in Colorado shooting some extreme sports stuff, and then my family came out to visit with me.
Right.
Was there a night that I had a meat lover's pizza all to myself? Yeah, there was. Spoiler, I'm not perfect in that regard, but I do know how to also then rebound from it. I also know that days before that, I kept myself on the right track to be like, okay, if I do this once, it's fine. So the biggest success is diet. And that doesn't mean, I can't stress this enough, that doesn't mean just eat vegetables. That doesn't mean I have this little piece of chicken. That doesn't mean take everything out that you enjoy. In fact, that's how you will fail. I guarantee it. There are my brother deals with weight issues too, and he goes on the keto diet every couple of months, and he's like, yeah, I love this diet. And then he's like, oh, I'm getting sick of the diet, and then he blows it out again. It's just like, well, take principles you like of that, apply it here, and then take that, a little bit of that.
Sure.
To bring it back around, it's a lot like what makes a pro wrestler great, is that, like, if you watch a guy like MJF, I won't spoil his people because he likes keeping it secret, but there's like there's 4 or 5 characters that in the annals of history of wrestling that he loves, that he's cherry pick things to help make his character make more sense, whether it's in-ring movements, whether it's moves, whether it's promos, whether it's style of talk. And now you have MJF. Like, find your way to build your diet. You know, take it from here. Okay, I love bacon. I don't want to go without bacon. Okay, that's cool, man. Bacon's in there. Now we have to work around that, though. You know, let's just eat right, diet.
And coming back to what you're saying, long-term goals, not short-term goals.
Just in life, or what are we talking about here?
Well, with that in terms of the diet, that if you just say, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, that's a lot different than saying, I'm going to lose weight and keep it off forever.
All right, well, long-term goal is, I'm 31 right now. I have a fiance. We're getting married at the end of the year in 2020. Eventually, we'll have kids. And, I don't know, my kids at this rate are probably graduating high school and when I'm, 55? Maybe 50? Somewhere in there, right?
Sure.
Maybe like late 40s, depending on how fast we get going.
Right.
I want to be able to go outside with them and throw a football. I want to be able to go outside with them and wrestle around. I want to be able to go outside with my 18-year-old child. At that point, yes, I can do that with a 4-year-old, but I'm talking like truly down the line, you know? I want to be able to do all those things. So that's like the biggest long-term goal I think a human should have, is that,
right.
For that reason.
In closing, Pat, any last words for the kids? The signature closer of closers.
Any last words for the kids, man? Do what you want to do, man. Do what makes you happy, and then figure out how to get paid.
And that's where you are.
Yeah. I make television. I wrestle. I get to edit fun stuff for YouTubers. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll have a super cool YouTube channel, too, for my own. I don't know, man. But I know that when I got into my professional life, it was, hey, my dad was a garbage man. My mom was a city worker for a judge. And those were great careers for them. And they gave us great lives. And they set us up nicely. So I'm not knocking any of those people. All right? Anybody who goes that route. But I'm different in that way where, hey, man, I can make a TV show for like 4 months, get paid really well to do it, have 2 months off, and I'm doing what I like to do. I guess the biggest thing is that, man, like between the ages of like 10 and 18, hell, 10 and 25, figure out what you want to do and then figure out how to get freaking paid doing it. I was going to say the other F word, but since this is for the kids,
For the kids, cool.
Paltrocast.